Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity to present to you today. My name is Mike Wood, and I'm the Regional Manager for Sunrise Energy Metals based in Parkes, just down the road. All right, we've got the obligatory cautionary statement, so I guess any of the information in the statement, in the presentation, we try and make sure it's as accurate as possible, but please use that information with caution. What we'll cover off on today is some details around our company name change, a project update on the Sunrise Battery Materials Complex. Then I'll hand over to James O'Connor, our senior geologist, to provide some geological details on the Sunrise ore body and an overview of our regional exploration activities. At the end of the presentation, we'll be happy to field any questions. Right. Some of you may have known us previously as Cleantech or Cleantech Sunrise. So last year we went through a divestment process to separate the two parts of the business, being the Sunrise project and Cleantech Water. While we're working on finance solutions for the Sunrise project, the two very different parts of the business created some confusion for investors, as it wasn't clear whether they were investing in an industrial wastewater treatment facility and technology company or a greenfields mining project. So the link between the two organisations is the proprietary Clean IX ion exchange technology that will be applied to the recovery of both nickel and cobalt on the Sunrise project. This technology is also used in the Cleantech Water's industrial wastewater treatment facilities. The parent company Cleantech Holdings has now been renamed Sunrise Energy Metals, and the water business has demerged into a separate ASX listed company and retains the Cleantech name and trades under the C&Q ticker. And a 1 for 10 share consolidation was also implemented during this demerger process. So in terms of the project update, the Sunrise project is one of the largest and most cobalt-rich nickel laterite deposits in the world, and it's development ready with all key permits and approvals in place. Sunrise is also one of the largest and highest grade scandium deposits globally. The current deposit contains ore effectively for 50 years of operation, so we're looking at a long-term project here. So the Sunrise project is located approximately 85 kilometres northwest of Parkes and Forbes and 40 kilometres northeast of Condobolin. So the project consists of the mining lease, ML 1770, a rail siding located 7 kilometres north of Trundle along the Bogan Way, an accommodation camp located just to the south of the project site, and a limestone quarry located along the Fifield Trundle Road to the southeast of the mining lease. Water will be supplied from the south of the project via a 65 kilometre long pipeline. We have licences for 6 bore pumps, with 2 currently installed and 2 river pumps located on the Lachlan River. While a gas pipeline connection is approved for the project, with a connection to the south of the project site connecting to the Moomba to Sydney gas line, this isn't our preferred energy supply. To reduce the carbon footprint of the project, we'll be sourcing 100% renewable energy for the project via the Central West Renewable Energy Zone. This will require a grid connection installed back to the Transgrid substation near Parkes via an 80 kilometre long transmission line. In terms of the site layout, the site covers just under 2,200 hectares, and as you can see, there's not a lot of free space once all aspects of the project are included. The main access point will be along Wilmartha Road on the southeast boundary of the project site, and the mine consists of two mining pits, the east and west pits, which James will cover in more detail later on in the presentation. Waste stockpiles will be located along the northern boundary, adjacent to Melrose Plains Road, and ore stockpiles will be located between the two mining pits to reduce tramming distances. The ore will be fed into the process plant via the ROM pad, with the processing plant located on the southeast boundary of the lease. There are several water storage and sediment dams across the mining lease, and topsoil storage locations for site rehabilitation. The site also contains two open woodland areas to be preserved and the Fifield State Forest along the northern boundary. As part of the construction phase, there will be an accommodation camp located to the south of the project site on an adjoining property, the Sunrise property, which we own. The camp will be used primarily during the 3-year construction phase of the project, and then once we move to the operations phase, we'll scale the camp back down to about a 300-person camp, which will be largely used for large maintenance shutdowns. Once we move to the operations for that phase of the project, we'll have about 350 full-time roles, and we'll run buses daily from Parkes, Forbes and Condobolin, picking up at other locations along the way. So the project execution plan is the output of the update to the definitive feasibility study, which was completed in 2018, and then this was further updated and put to the market in Q3 of 2020. So we worked closely with FLIR on this process, which allowed all of the work undertaken on the project to be consolidated into what we refer to as the project execution plan. So this gives us an overall cost and schedule to deliver the project with a high level of confidence. So the plan details a capital cost of $2.368 billion to deliver the project, with construction and commissioning period of 3 years, followed by a 2-year ramp up to full production of approximately 20,000 tonnes of nickel and 4,500 tonnes of cobalt. These nickel and cobalt metals will be in the form of nickel and cobalt sulfates, so approximately 90,000 tonnes and 21,000 tonnes respectively of nickel and cobalt sulfate produced annually. Nickel and cobalt sulfates can then be used directly in the production of cathodes for batteries, targeting the growth in the electric vehicle market. The project execution plan identified an EPCM model as the preferred project delivery model to deliver the Sunrise project. So establishing an EPCM contract will be one of the first activities undertaken once we secure funding for the project. In terms of financing, while we have good support from various sources for debt funding for the project, we're focusing our efforts on securing an equity partner for the project. The focus in this area is on the electric vehicle and battery manufacturers, who have an increasing need for nickel and cobalt to support global growth in the EV market as we move towards reducing our carbon emissions. This project will also deliver significant community benefits through taxes, a voluntary planning agreement in place with the Parkes, Forbes and Lachlan Shire councils, and employment within the local region. In terms of non-process infrastructure, this is one of the key activities we're working on at the moment, is planning for non-process infrastructure upgrades to allow us to de-risk the overall project schedule. While these activities in the planning phase aren't very capital intensive, but there's lots of engagement with various stakeholders, so it can take some time. In terms of the overall project costs, approximately $200 million of that is in infrastructure upgrades which sit outside of the mining lease, with a large portion of that being shared infrastructure such as road, rail, communication and power upgrades. So we're currently working closely with the Department of Regional New South Wales with their mining exploration and geoscience team, who provide a concierge service to facilitate interactions with other government agencies. This is a great service that MEG offer and can help to navigate the web of government departments. So for any of those developing projects out there, if you haven't used MEG's service in that space, I suggest you touch base with them and see where they can help your projects out. So some of the infrastructure upgrades include the 65 kilometre long water pipeline running from the south of the mining lease to the Lachlan River and borefields. There's in excess of 100 kilometres of high voltage power lines, which includes the 132 kV supply from Parks and several regional supplies to power borefields, the camp and the rail siding. There's approximately 36 kilometres of road upgrades, which are mostly along the planned haulage route between the rail siding and the project site, and 11 intersection upgrades. There's 35 kilometres of rail to be upgraded from Bogan Gate out to the rail siding located 7 kilometres north of Trundle. We also need to establish an oversized transport route between Port Pirie in South Australia and the project site. So this covers a distance of 1,200 kilometres with civil upgrades and relocation of overhead services required along the route. So we're currently working closely with road and power authorities across both South Australia and New South Wales to facilitate the planning for these upgrades. There's also the construction of the rail siding and an AMSOL storage shed to be constructed north of Trundle. In terms of recent project milestones, so we were awarded major project status from the federal government back in December last year. So that provides us with fast track approvals processes at the federal level, but it also provides investors with a level of confidence that we've got good support from the government for the project. We received a conditional letter of support for debt finance funding of $400 million, and so that was announced from Export Finance Australia in January this year. And as we developed the project execution plan, there were improvements made resulting in the execution plan differed from what the approved project was. So as a result, we completed the project modification. So that's Mod 7, which was completed last year, which was approved by the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment in January this year. We're also undertaking some test work to include capability for lithium battery recycling and battery precursor production from the Sunrise flow sheet. This will allow nickel, cobalt and lithium from spent batteries to be cost effectively recycled through reprocessing the black mass through the Sunrise refinery circuit. So battery precursor is the final step prior to battery cell production. So by incorporating battery precursor production into the Sunrise flow sheet, it allows us to further value add here in Australia and provide the opportunity for Australia to be a larger player in global battery value chains. Production of battery precursor forms part of our work with the Future Battery Industry Cooperative Research Centre, where industry, government and researchers work collectively to make our future battery industries more competitive through creating new economic opportunities. So, how people can get involved in the project. Any tenders for the project will be made available through ICN Gateway. There's probably limited opportunity for service providers to get involved until the project's funded, with the exception of some of the early works and exploration activities we're currently undertaking. We also run open offices at our office in both Condobolin and Parks on the second and fourth Tuesday and Thursday of the month, and updates are also available on the project via our website. I'll now hand over to James, our senior geologist, to provide a geological overview of the Sunrise deposit and an update on our exploration activities. Sorry mate, that was the bell.
It's all good. I got this. Alrighty, let's muck around. Thank you very much, Mike, for the comprehensive overview of how Sunrise is going to move forward. So if you may allow me, I may actually just take a step backwards now. And how did all this come into being? Okay, so there has been a long history of mining in the area. So the Fifield district is the only recorded source of platinum production in Australia, actually, with 639 kilograms of platinum being produced between 1887 and the mid-1960s. I won't dwell too long on this regional geology stuff because I'm sure that a lot of people are aware of it over the last 2.5 days. Points of note are the regional basement rocks of the Geology-Fifield group consist of sediments and metasediments of the early to middle Ordovician in age and are situated within the Geology-Fifield-Wagga anticlinorial zone. The Sunrise deposit lies over a mafic to ultramafic Alaskan-style intrusive complex known as the TOUT complex, sometimes also referred to as the Flemington intrusion, near the township of Fifield, which lies within the Lachlan Fold Belt of Australia. Uranium-lead shrimp dating undertaken on the gabbro surrounding the intrusive complex suggests an early Silurian age of 439 million years for the TOUT complex. Now, the local geology out there at Sunrise. So the core of the intrusion is a serpentinized dunite which is surrounded by pyroxenite and an olivine pyroxenite with gabbro forming the outer rim, which I mentioned earlier. The tertiary laterally weathering profiles developed preferentially over this serpentinized dunite, and the core of which is approximately 4 kilometres by 2 kilometres in dimension. The profile can be up to 35 to 40 metres thick in places, however it thins over the surrounding pyroxenites, giving the deposit a basin-like form. The deposit is cross-cut by several paleochannels that are on average 25 metres deep within the girthite zone, which I'll explain shortly, tending to be very thin or absent under these main channels that cross-cut the deposit. Furthermore, the silica girthite zone, which I'll also elaborate on shortly, tends to persist across the area but is generally thicker below the paleo highs. Alrighty, so what do all this terminology mean? So, let's kick off with, just very briefly, what is a laterite? So, there are quite a large wide range of definitions and interpretations of what actually a laterite is. This can refer to the soil itself, as opposed alternatively to the profile that has developed over an ultramafic or more mafic or felsic intrusion. So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, first thing to note is not all of these horizons that are up on the slide at the moment are actually present in all of the holes. So this can be attributable to more recent weathering processes that have transported away some of the overlying material. So what do all these layers and acronyms and all that sort of thing mean? So the alluvial cover, AV, comprises of poorly nickel, cobalt, mineralised silty clays and local ferruginous pisolite lenses and granites. The residual overburden, or the OVB, located up the top of the slide there, comprises of poorly nickel, cobalt, mineralised hematitic and common pisolithic material immediately beneath the alluvial cover. The transition zone, TZ, typically a mixed zone grading from red, brown and hematitic, commonly pisolithic near the surface, or just beneath the alluvial cover, to an orange-brown girthitic material near the base. So now we're getting into the important stuff. What we're looking for, the girthite zone, GZ, comprises of a relatively uniform, fine-grained orange-brown layer, mainly of extremely fine girthite. It typically contains more than 40% of iron but only about 5 to 10% of silica, interestingly enough. Minor proportions of manganese oxides are also generally present in this zone, but absent in the transported zone. The SGZ zone, or the silica girthite zone, is distinguished from the overlying girthite zone by an abrupt increase in silica content within the silica girthite zone, hence the name, averaging more than 20% silica. The silica is secondary, occurring as laminated veins or subhorizontal bands and as irregular coarse meshworks precipitated on joints and fractures. And lastly, the saprolite zone, or the sap zone, is a strongly weathered top of the underlying bedrock, while comprising mainly of clay, Relic igneous textures are also preserved. Okay, so what is the geochem telling us? First of all, it's very important to note the difference between a laterite profile over a ultramafic deposit versus a laterite profile over an intermediate. Ultramafic rocks we're finding that are more conducive for the development of a metal-enriched laterite profile. However, more recent erosional processes may result in the removal of the laterite profile overlying a ultramafic rock at shallower depths. As a result, we're seeing different concentrations in different elements in different parts of the profile, namely nickel, scandium, cobalt, platinum and chromium, as well as accessory minerals such as silica, manganese, goethite, kaolin, aluminium and magnesium. Okie doke. Nickel. At sunrise, nickel is primarily sourced from the serpentine contact within the ultramafic rocks. Hydrolysis reactions of the serpentine releases the nickel as well as magnesium, silica and iron. There's a gradual increase in concentration of nickel through the SAP and the SGZ zones in association with increases in iron and magnesium. We're finding that nickel actually peaks at the SGZ-GZ boundary and progressing upwards through the goethite zone. There's a decrease in iron and magnesium associated with decreased concentrations of nickel as well. Cobalt. At sunrise, it's been noted of the association between manganese and cobalt following surface redox reactions. There was found to be a strong correlation between cobalt and manganese ascertained from the geochemical data. The strongest positive correlation can be found within the goethite zone, and as you can also see in the core picture up there, it's also in the real world or in core, you're also seeing the darker coloration of the core indicating the increased manganese content. Boom. Okay. The scandium. The weathered serpentinite peridotite hosts the majority of sunrise scandium mineralisation. To illustrate this, background levels of scandium and aluminium in the peroxenite is up to 20 times more enriched than in the surrounding peridotite. At sunrise, we're finding that clinopyroxene is the primary source of the scandium plus or minus aluminium. The weathering of the aforementioned clinopyroxene and pyroxene enriches scandium through residual processes. Elevated levels of scandium can be seen at the silica goethite transported zone boundary where there is no goethite zone developed. This also results in increased levels of manganese and cobalt, as well as decreased levels of aluminium. The platinum group elements. The best platinum grades we're finding at sunrise can actually be found within the silica goethite zone. This is a result of the laterite development over the dunite prolith in addition to supergene processes. Platinum is also found to be associated with chromite veins and shear zones. It is interpreted that platinum is remobilised into these permeable zones within the dunite core and potentially along its contacts with the surrounding peroxenite. In addition to this, chemical remobilisation of the platinum occurred during weathering, resulting in differences between residual and secondarily deposited platinum. Just a very quick brief note on chromium. This actually exists as the resist state phase within the weathered ultramafic rocks. Magnetite reactions result in the rimming of chromite in the SAP and SGZ zones. The upper SGZ and goethite zones see the highest level of chromium through residual accumulation, and moreover this marks the boundary between the in situ regolith profile and also the material from the overlying OVB and AV zones. I'm kind of running a bit short on time, but that's just a quick overview of some of our platinum discoveries and some numbers associated with that. So basically, yeah, we got some bonanza grades of platinum from phase 2 of drilling, namely in hole 22, which revealed a platinum grade of 129 grams per tonne over 0.6 of a metre at 255 metres depth. Geophysics, okie doke. Unfortunately, there's a limited amount of geophysical data given the scarcity of the outcrop as well as spacing of drill hole patterns. Lithologies are really difficult, if not impossible, to distinguish just based on the magnetics alone. However, what we do know, dominant north to northeast trending of structures with a possible sinistral strengths of movement visible within the dunite complex. Different predominant directions occur on different sides of the intrusion actually as well, possibly the result of the magma cooling and fracturing as it intruded. In addition to this, multiple ring patterns have also been identified in magnetics that could actually represent internal intrusions or feeder pipes to the main intrusion. Okay, Stock standard slide there just to show the scale of the deposit. So that's actually superimposed over the Sydney CBD just to give you guys an idea of just how big this thing is and what we're hoping to endeavour to achieve in the future. Okay, regional exploration. So, at present we've just finished our drilling program in the Sunrise East tenement, and initial signs of this are encouraging from recent drilling. During the quarter, a 50-hole RC program was completed over the western half of the Intrusive complex, discovered in the previous 3-hole diamond program located within EL 4573. A total of 2,600 metres was actually drilled, with the planned holes targeting potential cobalt-bearing laterite developed over ultramafic rocks. And as you can see up there, just a brief summary of some of the core and chips that we're actually getting out of the holes, and you can see that it is quite noticeable, these zones within the laterite profile which contain an enrichment of the metals. Following on from this, downhole geophysics was also completed during the program over those rocks that were intersected and containing potential economic laterite intervals or elevated pyrite within the fresh rock. Okay, and one more deposit or tenement that we have that I'll just briefly touch on is High Lee. High Lee is located 50 kilometres north of the Sunrise deposit. It is also an Alaskan-style ultramafic intrusion similar to the Sunrise, with pyroxenite, hornblendite, peridotite, dunite, monzonite, diorite and gabbro. A well-developed oxide cover with significant cobalt, nickel, platinum and scandium intercepts has been developed over this ultramafic profile. A 96 RC drill hole program has just been completed. Again, assay results are pending. However, the signs are encouraging, as you guys can see just from the coloration of the laterite profile there that has been developed over the ultramafic rocks.